We come to this place for magic. We come to the Bladtcast to laugh, to cry, occasionally be revolted, to pretend that you care. Because we need that, all of us. That indescribable feeling we get when the sound begins to prematurely dim, preserving that sacred runtime that is always measured in full minutes. And we go somewhere we've never been before. Not just entertained, but somehow reborn. Together. From guests who feel obligated to come on because Christian used to work for that famous guy, to hearing all about that one time Captain EO went home with a stripper. Dazzling conversation on tiny earbuds that repeatedly fall out, or a huge pair of Beats by Dre that never fit, but you spent $200 on them, so you wear them anyway. Sound we all can feel. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. Our hosts feel like the best part of us, and stories feel perfect and powerful. Anyone who thinks being on the show will help them get on to bigger shows, it won't. The Bladtcast. We make podcasts better.
This is the Bladtcast, a sometimes fast-paced but usually meandering look at the world, hosted by Christian Bladt. So kick back, get ready for quite possibly the longest 1 hour to perhaps the shortest 2 hours and 56 minutes of your life. And now, here's Christian Bladt.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to the Bladtcast. Thank you to the great Farad Muhammad, and thank you to El Sassy Paz herself, Katie Hampton, who is not joining us for Acolyte Roundtable, but her husband is, Mark Hampton. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. I assume you knew Katie recorded. She recorded like 5 different versions of that for us, but that's my favorite.
I can't keep up with all the things she's doing and recording. I can't keep up. This
Well,
is how
like
I find out.
Like so much work in this industry, she didn't get paid for it. Also with us, our friend Kaitlin Cornell, who we've known for years. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk Star Wars with us, to talk Acolyte with us. And thank you for being here today, Kaitlin.
Thank you for having me. I've always talked Star Wars with you, Christian.
And you know him, you love him. The man, the myth, the legend, Erik Nagel, celebrating 10 years of It's Erik Nagel. Erik, thank you for being back here on the show.
I'm already starting this off with a problem. I was led here under false pretenses. I was told a different Mark H was going to be part of this, but here we are.
You thought it was Mark Halperin, the political reporter, and we all want to know what he thinks of the Acolyte. But if Erik is here, along with him is his cohort, his Sancho Panza, Jordan.
My better half.
Yes, I'm sure your wife would appreciate hearing that.
Who?
Thanks for having me, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And I think
Erik told me he's holding my paychecks until I actually do something, so I had to come.
Oh, but and now Kate and Mark are like, wait, there's payment in podcasts, and the answer is no, not really. So
Monetize what?
Yeah, well, this channel's not monetized. So if anybody wants to send fake super chats, we'll put them up and we'll pretend that there's a dollar amount. Because it's a Star Wars show, we'll make up a number of credits that we're getting for each one. So I'm very interested in having a conversation on the Acolyte because for those who don't know, I usually try to approach things from the fandoms that I enjoy. I always give the benefit of a doubt. I always expect it to be good. I want to enjoy it. Even when it doesn't start off strong, I think it'll turn around. In the last year, I've gotten burned a couple of times, most notably Secret Invasion, but we don't need to talk about Marvel here. But that was a pretty rough one. And I couldn't, I don't know where to begin with the Acolyte, because I think that it's not even one of those ones. Sometimes you're like, oh, there was a good story in there somewhere and they didn't quite find it. I personally find a lot of fundamental problems with it. I find the story to be fairly weak, but more than anything, my problem was that almost every single character felt miscast. I think that the best character is sadly killed off in the first 4 minutes, but then we see her again later. So, we can talk about all of those things, but to say that this was a disappointment would put it mildly. There's one saving grace that I'll highlight, but I'll sort of go clockwise as everyone's on screen. Mark, what were your overall thoughts on the Acolyte?
I went in just like you. I was excited for it. It looked like a big departure from what they had been doing with like Mandalorian, Boba, things like that. But I think it was like episode 3. I realized that this is just a big mess. It was just a big mess. Structurally, I have no idea what they were doing. We thought she was going to have a split personality, which I think would have been so cool. And then at the end, it was twins. I was like, well, where was that set up? Like, where did that come from? I thought it was woefully directed, and I think it's just another big miss from Lucasfilm and that whole team, where I think they've just Disney Plus'd everything. The whole Dave Filoni universe is just so boring to me, and I feel like I do think there might have been an interesting story in there, but I just don't think it was told very well, and I think that's been Lucasfilm's problem for a while now, with the exception of Andor. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think Andor was sort of that rare example where it wasn't even remotely what you thought it was going to be. I know people that haven't enjoyed Star Wars in decades who are like, oh, but that was pretty cool because it was like grown up, but not in the, Stars TV, the Cinemax After Dark way that it was grown up. It was like, oh, it was adult storytelling. But we can circle back on that and everything else. Kate, what did you think of the Acolyte?
This is interesting because I think for the first time I'm going to be a devil's advocate on one of your shows, Christian.
Well,
I enjoyed it.
Well, I think you liked the Matt Reeves Batman more than anyone else, but this would be a rarity. Yeah. You're not the only one I know who liked it, but I would say it's a short list. But by the way, I would love to have liked it. I really wanted to. What do you think about it sort of made it click the most for you personally?
I think for me, because the story was pretty. I will say that episode 3 was the only one that bothered me, but I don't think it fit in with the rest of the show, and it really did feel like, and we can get to it when we talk about it. It did feel like the producers not trusting their audience and the producers not trusting the writing of it, because it just felt very ham-fisted. So I know a lot of people stopped at episode 3 or felt the same way Mark did about. It just felt like it was all a mess. But if you take episode 3 out of it and just look at the whole thing, I feel like having it be a mystery, like you're solving the crime of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. I thought the villain was really interesting. And then at a certain point, you didn't know who the villain was. And I felt that it wasn't as ham-fisted of they were going with what the prequels had kind of started to do. But I think through bad casting of or bad direction of the prequels, they weren't really able to. They were trying to kids movie it, and this is the adult version of that kids movie of the Jedi Order might not be the good guys, and what that actually looks like, and what that feels like, and what the I finally got elements of the larger world of Star Wars and the larger galaxy of Star Wars, and what the political landscape looked like. And it was kind of the same vibe that I liked about Andor, which is I got more of the world without it always being about, it was the Jedi version of Andor for me. It was darker, it was grittier, it was more interesting, but it was about this kind of Jedi Sith political system, whereas Andor was about like, what does this world actually feel like and what does it look like? And I liked getting history without getting flashback of that history. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was really interesting. But third episode really tore me up.
Yeah.
Screenwriting wise, I was like, oh, why did you do that?
A couple things in there. The idea that the Jedi might not be the good guys is the most intriguing thing from this, because it's not something that they've explored very well. I don't think that they navigated it pretty well. in this. And Mark, I believe your wife Katie, who people know on this show and Marvel Movie Talk and some other shows that I've done with her, she did stop after episode 3, right? She tapped out and she said, "No, I'm good." Yeah,
She couldn't do anymore. She
Yeah,
just
she was-
forgot about it.
She was somehow able to watch season 2 of Star Trek Picard, but this was too much for her.
No, she didn't watch season 2 either.
Okay, that's you know what. You know what? Good thing you married her. Because you don't want those instincts.
I fell on that sword both times.
Yeah, well, I get it. I would have been in a similar situation. There's a few other things to pull on from what you said, Kate, but I want to give Erik and Jordan a thought, to an opportunity to share their thoughts. And you'll see me disappear for a second, but I'll be right back and I'll be listening.
Okay.
Oh, bye. Well, now that he's gone.
He said, "Yeah, I want to hear what they have to say," but never directed it to.
But not really. I'll listen to it
Erik,
later.
Erik,
Jordan, why don't you go first?
No, earlier I had said we were going clockwise, and I think in New Jersey clocks go the other way. It's like drains.
Yeah, it's like
in
the southern
Australia.
hemisphere. It just
Right.
Yeah.
We can do age
hurricanes.
before we'll do that.
Yeah, hurricanes, toilets, all of this goes the wrong way.
all that stuff.
All right. So yeah, I thought it was definitely 8 episodes and had Star Wars' name on it. I did want to.
It's a hot take, by the way.
I was going into this
like that, Erik.
Not unlike a lot of the internet. I go into each Star Wars property. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, but I'm a casual fan of it, and I do watch a lot of it. I go into every new series and new season hopeful. I'm like, all right, I'll give this a chance. I know everyone's hating it because whatever reason they're deciding to hate this new Star Wars story, but I went in there and I didn't care about the racial casting like a lot of other people seem to have that a big thing. It's like, oh, it's everybody but, and then the white person gets killed at the beginning. It's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. They were aliens and other made up things. It's fine. Who cares? I did expect more. Like Kate said, it got boring. I liked the concept. There were some detours. Was the 3rd episode that you were talking about? Is that the Witches' Coven episode?
The flashback. To the
Yeah,
witches of Eastwick, basically.
That seems to be a place that derailed a lot of people's momentum with this. I was very interested in the twin story, the separation story. Didn't really need the Witches' Coven thing. The fact that we didn't know where they came from until later, like if that would have just been revealed, like, oh, they're Force babies or whatever they're calling it, some kind of cosmic creation, that would have been great down the line. You didn't need it in the 3rd episode, and you didn't need the whole coven thing and the chanting and all that stuff. 1, 2, we're all in this together, however it goes. Wasn't the big, I think, catchphrase that they were hoping was going to take off and be hashtags and t-shirts and all of that stuff. Everyone just went, who gives a shit about all of that? Focus on the 2 kids, focus on the new Obi-Wan with the guy from Squid Games, and you would have been fine. The lore, and not even revealing that much as they did towards the end of the season in the 1st season. You could have saved some of that for the 2nd season and still been okay.
Well, why do you never save things for the 2nd season? Because you don't know if you're going to get one, and I would be shocked if
they're going to get one. In certain franchises, that especially Disney, they're going to continue it. Whether you want it to or not, they're going to. It's not like we loved this show on Netflix a while back called 1899, and we were all involved with it, and then it had a great cliffhanger ending, and then they're like, yeah, we're not going to invest in that anymore, so we're just going to cancel it. And go, why am I wasting my time on all these new shows just for all these networks and streaming services to cancel it? You're pretty safe with the assumption that if you go into a Star Wars property, they're going to at least continue it a little bit more, maybe a movie, maybe a 2nd season, and then you'll get more than just the 1 season.
Right.
It was okay. It was boring in times. I really didn't like the lack of emotion in almost every character. And the twins later on started, realizing, oh, we have emotions and we can play on that. Master Saul he was like dead inside from the jump. Like he just had no emotions, no reflections. As much as he was saying that he loved the 2 girls, he really didn't get to it till later, where all of a sudden, I guess we'll talk about what happens at the end of the last episode, but
we can.
That's when he started to, like, it's like somebody lit a fire under his ass and he started to become somewhat of a human being or whatever they are in this time now. I know he had the language barriers. I know this was the first time he was doing an English role, and I fully understand that. I wasn't even having an issue with some of his English and the flow of his cadence stumbling. That was nothing. It's just when stuff was happening, he was very dead-faced, very wax-figured, no emotions, no reaction, and that takes you out of a lot of it too. You want people screaming and yelling and panicking or happy and stuff going on. That's part of the whole storytelling, and everybody just kind of fell flat with all of this.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why Lee Jung-jae was great in Squid Game was the huge range of emotions and how much we could connect with him.
He was going to die in every episode, of course he had to be alive.
Yeah.
Like here, he's like, well, I might survive till the end of this, so I don't really need to put in the effort.
And I want to be able to be forgiving of the language barrier, but I think because of the way that he delivered everything, I think if he had like an emotional performance and that was the way he spoke, you'd be able to do it. But the sort of deadpan monotone everything and the way that it just feels like a struggle for some of the lines to be delivered, I felt like you said, Eric, we really didn't get a sense for that character until the end. And even so, I'm like, I don't know if this meshes.
And it was too little too late at that point. So
before we go down any number of possible rabbit holes, Jordan, what did you think of The Acolyte?
I'm kind of split between everyone else's opinion and Kate because I like the overall idea of this show.
Yeah.
But the problem is the way they told the story. This 8 episodes feels like a prequel to something better. They set up so much stuff for something better.
Right.
And we're not promised that. We're not promised something better. We're going to get what we got. Episode 3 was kind of a halt to what it could have done. Episode 7 was the same way. You don't put a penultimate episode to the season, series, whatever ender and have it be a flashback grind to a halt. You're almost watching the same episode as episode 3, but from a slightly different point of view. And it wasn't as interesting at all. And it's frustrating that this show feels like if you don't know history, canon, 1,000 texts of other things, you don't get it. You don't get why the lightsabers went away. You don't get the lightsaber whip. You don't get any of this stuff. Now, things like the monotone nature of the Jedi, I can forgive because this is High Republic Jedi. They're supposed to be emotionless, robotic, very calm, at peace with themselves. So maybe the emotion is not going to be there. The problem is when everybody's a Jedi, you have to have a contrast. Yeah. And there was almost no contrast to that. So you've got nothing but white bread all the way to the end, and then all of a sudden it's done, and you're like, okay, what else? So it's frustrating because I like it, but I don't at the same time. Like, I feel bad for the audience that doesn't know all the stupid inside and out like I do.
And there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. I've seen a smattering of animated stuff over the years, and I haven't read any of the novels in the 21st century. I did pretty good into the 90s, and then there was just too much to keep up with. So there's a lot of sort of expanded stuff that I don't know, and it's sort of some of the things that might be referred to. So I think that with the casting and Carrie Ann Moss, I feel like was the best character in here because I felt like she was very well realized. And at first I really was like, wow, they killed her off in 4 minutes. We do see her again. And I do find that to be an interesting character, one of the more interesting. But I think the fundamental problem goes back to what I was saying and what I started saying. Probably I gave it to episode 2, but I just felt, I'm sure she's great in other things. Amanda Stenberg, who played both Osha and May, I felt like she wasn't capable of portraying one character on this show, let alone 2. So every time she was on screen, I was just like, this is tough. This is a little hard to watch. And I don't usually try to be overly critical on acting performances except for Madam Web. But outside of Madam Web, I'm usually done. Madam Web, you can't help yourself. But outside of Madam Web, and it's just, it just was so stark just how much of a misfire this actress seemed like for me. And I found some of the characters on paper. It didn't matter the actor that portrayed them. There's this character Yord who is like bro Jedi, and more so than May and Osha is Sith Lord Jason Mendoza from The Good Place.
Blake Bortles.
Love him on The Good
I
Place.
love him to death.
It came as close to making us care about the Jacksonville Jaguars as anything ever could. And I think before the big reveal that he was the actual, Dark Lord, Sith Lord, I don't think they use the word Sith at this point.
The stranger.
Yeah. He was more fitting as that character, as sort of the lackey, who is working with May.
Did you find the reveal to be really aggravating?
Yes, I did.
Because they telegraphed it right before it was going to happen, and you're like, oh, really? Surprise.
Yep.
Yeah, there were none of the M. Night Shyamalan reveals connected on this show. There were a few. It was very clear, and I mean, some of them weren't that hidden, like when May switched places with Osha. There's probably people that didn't quite get it, but you pretty much got what had happened. But yeah, I thought that as much as I've enjoyed him, I've really only known him from The Good Place. I was like, well, put the helmet back on. This might work, if you have the helmet on. Mark, it might be
in Star Wars design. Like once you get when you get the close up in episode 6.
Yeah. And I mean,
so
I think
cool.
that because it's sort of like a DIY, helmet, you know what I mean? It's not.
This is how nerdy I am. I actually pre-ordered that helmet. I have it coming from a.
You were wearing that on the next show.
Once it comes in, I will gladly do so. It's,
I was wondering if you were getting it in time for Comic-Con or other event, but
no, they don't have it releasing until next year. That's the downside to some of this stuff. They we don't know if it's going to hit or not, so we'll put it together and then you can pre-order it, but you got to get it a year later. By that time, you don't know that you did it or you don't care, and then you got a big box sitting on your doorstep. So.
Well, let's focus on some of the characters, but also the characterization. So the characters that were clearly on the page and the way they were brought to the screen. Mark, am I being overly harsh for the twins? And as I like to say, Sith Lord Jason Mendoza from The Good Place.
No, you're just commenting on what you were given. I think Amanda Stenberg is a very good actress. I think she suffered from the same problem that everybody suffered. The tone of the show was so bland and boring. Forgive the phrasing. It had no nuts, had no edge whatsoever. Sure. And I think she was just a victim of that, unfortunately. I thought Sith Lord Jason Mendoza was the most interesting character on the show. I don't think we got nearly enough because it's all about, the seduction to the dark side. I mean, that's what's going on with Osha. And I feel like we just got a couple of conversations that, they might as well have just been in a cafe. It was just so boring. They're just sitting there kind of talking about feelings and stuff. I would have just loved so much more because I thought the stranger was a very interesting character. I wanted to know where he came from. I wanted to know if he's working with someone. So many questions that I think should have been answered that weren't. But yeah, I thought
liked
he was
that they weren't answered. I liked keeping him a stranger personally. And then you get that moment in episode 8 where it's, oh, you're alive. And it's like,
who is he? What kind of connection? Yeah.
But we
that
knew.
He's watching her not doing anything. And it's just like, and there's a part of me that I think Jordan might clue in on where it's like, this is the closest we're probably going to get to a Revan-esque storyline.
Yeah, or the start of the Knights of Ren. I think this is the impetus to starting that.
They were hinting super hard, but it's gonna. I think it's. I kind of liked that I didn't need because I didn't need to know, and I think that was a really good otherwise, it would have felt like too much like we're being spoon fed, and it is supposed to be a crime show. It is supposed to be who is who and who is the good guy and who's the bad guy because we know from Jump who the killer is. But it's
look,
the mystery about everything else.
If they did Law and Order Jedi Knights unit, I think that would have been a phenomenal show. But,
I would watch that. I would watch the shit out of that.
Lucy Moody commenting that there were some cool details, but it was just dull. And our friend Ivan Soto showing up in the chat. OSHA immediately turning was too cheap and fast.
Agreed.
And I think you have a question about Kylo Ren starting the Knights. I think that being called the Knights of Ren is a bit of a confusing name because I believe that it predates Kylo Ren.
It does.
Yeah. But completely valid question, Ivan. I wasn't even sure of my answer as I was giving it. Kate, as someone who seems to have enjoyed the show the most out of the five of us, not seems to, it's proven. Which characters do you felt like worked for you? And it can obviously be the ones that we've already been critical of. We want to hear all the different takes on this show. So please let us know who you felt worked best for you.
Well, what's interesting is like it's when Jordan said like I don't know if people who don't know the lore enjoy the show as much, or I think it was Erik that said. Sorry, it was Erik that said that they. I'm not sure because I do know it, so maybe that added to my enjoyment of it. Like the easiest thing for me to point out is the lightsaber whip is from Legends, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. If I finally see it. And hearing like the power of two and starting to really get like what the Sith lore was, and as a fan of Clone Wars and later Rebels, like it was kind of cool to kind of see that laid in. But I really enjoyed taking episode 3 out of it because it is extremely problematic, and I do not think it was originally there. I'm one of those people. I do not think that episode was in the original arc. I feel like they were trying to do like an almost Rashomon like effect to this show, where you get information piecemeal, almost like interrogation style, like you're getting other people's perspective and then you get the full story, and no one is really right in their viewership of it. But I do like how they were arcs that started like Yord and the Jedi female who was hanging out with
Jackie.
Osha a lot, Jackie. And thank you. And you kind of get you get a great left to right moment with Yord of like, we have to go back, we have to help them. And I thought that I don't think Manny did all of his lightsaber fighting, but whoever was his stunt double really handled the choreography really well. And I felt like it's some of the most interesting choreography of lightsabers I've seen in a really long time, but it still kept it in the time period. Like the Wookiee fighting was definitely style like Form 1 with the broadsword, but you still get you get a lot of variety of what the training actually is for the Jedi without them kind of like hitting you with it. But I do like with Yord, you get this great left to right moment of like, I have to do my job and no, we have to go back. And he chooses to follow her and go back. So he does actually like go away from what his original like motivations would have been and does kind of rebel a little bit. And it's the first time, like it was a brutal death. Like you get attached to these characters in the first 4 episodes and then you see them all just get obliterated. And then it's I've had the feeling at the end of episode 5 of like complete loss, because it's almost like a Psycho moment of like the killer is in the house and I've lost my protagonist and I don't know who to follow anymore. And I don't know who's right and I don't know who's wrong. And I just thought it was really interesting, like as an audience, because I was like kind of holding my head up and going like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do now? Like I lost, like she had all this like band of merry men and now they're all gone. And now she's with the villain and then May is with the good guys, but the good guys might not be the good guys. And like, It put me through this emotional state. And it was because of the way that they built all the characters up and then were willing Game of Thrones style to just like take them away. Like Jaime Lannister was a good guy. Like, is he? What? So I kind of felt like maybe it wasn't executed to the best point. I feel like they definitely got a little scared that the audience wasn't going to follow. So they felt like, oh, we need to get the information in on the Coven and we need to get like Osha's side of what she sees. I wish that was built better, but it wasn't. But I feel like they got freaked out of like, we want the story to be this kind of mystery that we then start to slowly reveal. And then I think people got nervous that people wouldn't understand it. And then so you get these kind of like hits of information that feel out of place.
In the Too Little Too Late department, I would agree that in episode 8, I thought that the lightsaber battles were some of the best that we've seen in an incredibly long time. I actually, it was like, oh, I dislike this show so much at this point. It hasn't won me over, but it certainly was them putting their best foot forward at the end, which, a lot of shows do is they try to get another season. Let me bring in some questions in the chat before I go to Eric. Lucy Moody trying to do Rashomon is first year film student hack shit. And that's Lucy Moody's comment. And Ivan Soto, thank you for giving us this insight. Manny Jacinto,
thank you.
Said the stranger, Jason Mendoza, said in an interview, I believe he did almost all of his own stunts, even when he's under the mask. I think that's great.
You're great.
And let's go to this. One thing that was perfect in this show was without the fight sequences, because I always wondered if Jedi could even fight without lightsabers, like if they only relied on their powers. As we are still sort of speaking on the characters and the actors portraying them, Eric, what stands out for you, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, in terms of the characters that make up the show?
Well, problem I was having with a lot of this, it does involve the storytelling, the pacing a lot. It seems like in every aspect of our life now, say what you want about wrestling, writing, storytelling techniques seems to have invaded every aspect of other storytelling, even our political climate, our daily lives and stuff. Having it
I do
where
like
it's
wrestling. Maybe that's me. Oh shit.
Well, by the way, just to interject, Eric, I think you're way out of bounds because obviously we haven't seen one of the most iconic wrestlers introduce a presidential candidate at a convention within the last week. So
was that just a week ago?
Yeah.
It feels like 10 years, but yes. So yeah, I do agree with that. As someone who, I only ever really liked Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling, the animated series. I don't know that much about wrestling. I'm almost 50.
Oh, Jesus.
But Eric, please continue your sentence. I'm so sorry. You just blew my mind for a second.
No, but it's okay. But it's a great point.
So what I was saying is about wrestling seems to invade a lot of other aspects of our lives and storytelling. This whole story was very muddied, where it's like, well, the Jedis we thought were good are now bad, or are they not good, or are they not bad? Like, it's always like the hero, anti-hero. Everyone can't be the anti-hero in all of this stuff, because then everyone is exactly the same. And some people could say, well, there's never a clear-cut winner or loser, good guy, bad guy, whatever, because that's how real life is. We're not watching any of this stuff to reflect real life. Maybe some things that come out of real life, but we're not looking to watch real life. Otherwise, we don't need to sit here and watch this. I'll go out to the park and just watch real life unfold and see the same nonsense that I'm seeing here. So when you're having like, well, is he the stranger really that bad? Or is he just, a product of like religious nonsense, political nonsense, whatever was going on? So now he's rebelling against this. And are the Jedis really the bad guy? Or it's like, you can have clear-cut storylines sometimes. Not all the time, but you can say, all right, we know this is the good person, we know this is the bad person, and we know these are the good and bad entities. And yeah, they'll do good and bad things time to time, but we have an idea of where this all falls out. This whole story makes everyone a suspect and then makes everyone guilty of everything at the same time. So it's really hard to figure out who you're going to root for or who you're going to follow and who becomes the interesting standout that's against the backdrop of all of this stuff, because line them all up, it's just like they all look exactly the same as far as the story's going. I do enjoy, I can't think of the character, the bald green Jedi, what's her name?
Vanestra.
Oh, yeah, Vanestra.
Right?
Yeah.
Towards the end, right? Yeah. When she's playing diplomat, also, I mean, I guess Jedi, religious leader, all of these things. She's playing politics in the way that we know, and we can see like she's letting other people take the fall. It's almost mafia tactics, where it's like this guy died, and then you go and say, oh, this guy was a great family man, and really lived for his community, but you're pinning everything on this person, and if this person died, oh, that guy was so horrible. You don't know the stuff that we found that he did, and he really was an innocent person. So they're muddying everything. She seemed to be the most realistic out of everybody here. You mentioned about the lightsaber and the hair, and that freaked me out too, because when she just went like that and cut a perfect little bang divot right here in the front. So now she looks exactly like her sister. It's like, really? Because anyone else gets near those things had 3 holes punched through their chest or burnt their hands or whatever. But she was able to just, do the flip whip thing with the lightsaber, and her hair looked perfect. And I'll just change clothes and you'll never know. It's like,
It was the Willow Smith technique, I think.
I was trying to think of the song. I couldn't, whip my hair back and forth. That's exactly what it was.
I pushed you over the wall there. Huck Walton. That's exactly what we loved about Game of Thrones. We revered it for subverting the duality of good and evil.
Yeah, but they did it in a better way. They just didn't know how to stick the landing of that series, right?
I do. Right. I do think Vanestra is kind of like the like Ralphie on The Sopranos. Just give her another season and you'll see what she's up to. She's planting evidence. She's prepared to lie to Master Yoda. Spoil for the last shot of the show.
Yeah, and the next season we'll find her head in a bowling bag buried somewhere on Tatooine because Yoda's just like, I can't deal with this anymore. We had to make her disappear.
If they do a Pine Barren style episode on Hoth, it'll make up for something that I'll focus on next. Jordan, your thoughts on the characters and the actors who portrayed them?
I think this show does suffer from a lot of bad casting, and as much as we want to constantly go against,
sorry, on this show, when
Amandla,
you agree with me, you get one of these.
There you go.
You get an official Cardiff Electric bill.
Oh, I love Cardiff. He knows me as Josh. I don't think May and Osha were that compelling. Here's the other problem is that they cast their younger counterparts, not as twins. They look different, which really, really frustrated me from a story standpoint.
Yeah.
And they were just as wooden. So I don't know if it's direction. I don't know if it's casting. I mean, child actors are hard to work with, especially if you're going to have to cast one to play 2 roles. Sometimes that could be a problem, but it's just hard to care about that character in either iteration. The
director of those 2 episodes was, I believe, really inexperienced. He's done a feature, a couple shorts, and is actually known as a YouTube commentator. Like, he does video analysis essays on mostly editing. So that's why I feel like the episode 3 wasn't meant to be in there, because the visual language between the 2 episodes, 7 and 3, were completely different, and they were very tight. So I feel like he wasn't experienced enough to direct the actors effectively.
Yeah, and I think that this story probably still would have had its same issues, but it should have been told in 8 episodes. Episode 3 and episode 7, combine the 2. Give us a longer episode. This whole reason to change the run times constantly makes no sense to me. One episode could be 30 minutes, the other one's 45 minutes. That's just bad storytelling. And it means you just don't know how to create a larger narrative. And that really frustrates me.
Less time than you thought they would.
I mean, some of them, like I like the choreography of the show. That last episode was very, crouching tiger, hidden dragon with lightsabers. It was cool. There was that one shot where he's coming down on Soul and Soul doing stuff. Yeah, I saw strings.
Cool.
It's hard for me to nail down a character that we haven't talked about. Like, I like the Stranger. I like Kamir. I like the duality of his character, where when he's not in the mask and he's trying to kind of push May into doing things that he's trying to guide her to try to vet her out as the one he wants as his acolyte. It's kind of cool to see him try to pull those strings without getting involved. And he's like, hey, you got to do this thing. The guy told us we have to do it this way. And he's kind of pushing her. So they telegraph who he is almost immediately. You're like, oh, yeah, that's the guy. But he's cool. And then when he's under the mask, he's cool, calm, collected. He's got, it's like he's in a sensory deprivation mask. So now he's focused. When he's out of the mask, I think he's unfocused because he's constantly thinking someone's checking in on me. And that could be part of his upbringing with the Jedi Order or not. I don't know. We don't know that. And that kind of speaks to his character, and I kind of like that character.
He was the Padawan to
Vanestra.
Yeah, Vanestra.
Right.
Yeah. I found OSHA in the helmet, in the sensory deprivation helmet, to be a fascinating concept that they didn't do nearly enough with. They was sort of like, I'm like, oh, well, we'll get back to this, and we wouldn't. Well, as we talk about the characters, there is one that I think, and I'm on a text thread with a few Geekscape regulars, Jonathan London, Ian Kerner, and a few other people. And there's one character that we all went back to week after week. And that, of course, is Basil, the hunter. He is consistently, it was like, wait, I sniff out some really bad exposition. I'll help you get to the bottom of this next week. Don't worry. I'll make sure that it's not there. And I found him to be, I don't know, just a breath of fresh air in a sea of,
he had the most range.
Bantha turds. Yeah. I found him to be delightful. I found him to be entertaining. You want to do a standalone movie on the Basil Chronicles, please sign me up. I have no problem with that.
Also, the creature effects in this show in particular, I thought were really interesting. I thought they delved more into like what the monsters of this world were.
Right.
And a lot of the effects, like that little like bird thing on the stranger's planet was practical. A lot of Basil was practical with like CG effects on like for facial expressions and stuff, but you could tell that there was a performer there. And I kind of like that they went back to all of like the practical effects and making it as in camera as possible, and being brave enough to not always have dialogue going. The Basil scenes when he's on the ship is a lot of silence and a lot of him just figuring stuff out and being, awesome.
Huck Walton agrees. Yay, Basil. I don't know where I'd be right now if it hadn't been for Basil. I don't know. I don't know whom I would have sought for Jedi-like counsel and guidance. But
also the Venestra's. Oh God, Jordan, do you know his name? The really cool guy, Venestra's little sidekick that told her maybe you shouldn't go into hyperspace because you get nauseous. He was lovely.
Her consigliere.
He was very fantastic.
Yes. Lovely.
Well, what I remember sort of realizing as this was unfolding week to week, everyone here, even Kate, who enjoyed the show, is very critical of episode 3. And yes. I do find that to be one of the worst hours of science fiction I've watched in my life, keeping in mind that I've seen the series finale of Star Trek Enterprise. Sorry, Mark, but you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I didn't write it.
Oh, but I'm sorry. Let's go down this road really fast. What did you write, Mark?
Well, I don't write for Star Trek.
No. But what did you write fanfic of Star Trek that?
Yes, I
prepared to go into production?
Yes, I in high school I created my own Star Trek show about the it would be Next Gen Universe, about the crew of the Excelsior. It's when I got into writing and fell in love with writing, and I actually wrote basically 8 seasons worth of like arcs and things like that. I have drawings.
Was it Captain by Solo or no?
No, it's
not Sulu. No, because this is
sorry.
It's the next gen timeline. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was captained by an admiral who was the villains were like terrorists, a little Picard feel, but they were like terrorist cells within the Federation.
Picard season 1.
Yeah, kind of better though.
By the way, I'm sure it was.
Right.
But yeah, it was about Starfleet bringing this admiral back to head up this task force, and the Excelsior was the head of the fleet.
The first time your wife Katie ever mentioned you as being somebody that we should have on one of our shows to talk about Star Trek, she led with that fact, and I'm like, how many seasons? Yeah. We definitely have to talk to Mark, and so I appreciate that. But
yes.
Back
as
to
a Trek
this.
fan, I appreciate it.
Huck Walton, episode 3, almost ruined the show. It didn't almost ruin the show. For me, it ruined the show. And the very smart-ass comment that I had on the aforementioned text thread was, you do have to commend the people behind the scenes for having the balls to take the worst hour in the history of Star Wars and repeat it just a few weeks later and give you that same story from another point of view, the story that didn't work, the story that everybody hated, and obviously they didn't know how it was going to be received. Go ahead.
At one point, Jordan and I were talking about the last episode when it came back to the I call it like Witch Mountain or whatever the place is called.
Escape from Witch Mountain. Yeah.
So where the bridge is breaking and Saul's holding both ends of the bridge to try to save both the kids. And then he couldn't do the same bridges anymore, so he just went and put his super force powers over in this way. And Jordan brought up a good point. He goes, if he's holding two bridges and that's becoming too much, if he lets go of the bridge, that other kid can't weigh like what 70 pounds, 80 pounds. He could have just went and grabbed her instead of holding the bridge while yanking the other two and pulled them off of there. Instead, he held the other one and just let the other one fall to her death. Alleged death.
It's weird to think that, you know, you've got Jedi that can lift starships and hold them up and move things, and he can't hold scaffolding for less than 5 minutes. It's just there.
And
there
he's
are
a very good
things
Jedi.
about, and he's not a Padawan. He's experienced, so he should have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So that is just a number of different choices in the story that takes me out of it enough to where I say I can't fully enjoy the show, but I do, you know, I find fault, which you're going to.
Yeah, no. It was like, I just thought it was unfortunate because it put me in a situation where, you know, and Eric, you touched on it a little bit. A lot of the backlash against this show was for all the wrong reasons. You know, it was it was the casting, not because of the performances, but because of the ethnic makeup of the cast. And I'm like, you've watched Star Wars before, and okay, after A New Hope, they started doing a good job, a better job with that. Let's take A New Hope out of it. Go ahead, Eric.
At the beginning, as this was ramping up to it, and even after the first episode, the complaints online were, yes, the diverse casting, no white people. That's what people were getting upset about. But two, the other thing that they were getting upset about was some of those satellite interviews, you know, leading up until the show, where the director was speaking with, she was sitting with Amanda Steinberg, and they were talking to whatever reporter at that time was sitting in front of them, and she said something along the lines. She goes, "This might be the most gayest property or gayest Star Wars that's out there," and all. And people were like, "What? Why is this an issue? Why?" You know, they were getting upset with that. As this series went on, you stopped seeing people complaining about the cast diversity. There was no mention about, you know, what they were getting ramped up before that. It was like, oh, this is going to be a super gay Star Wars. None of that went anywhere. It was the Witch's Mountain episode and how boring it got after that. And I'm like, wow, they tried to figure through all these other properties how to shut up the some of the Star Wars audience from their complaints and nonsense. They found a way to do it to shut them up for all that stuff, and then at the unfortunately at the expense of the show, where it was boring and lackluster. Those issues going into it were just kind of superficial, and then the real issues with the show came out, and now that's all anyone's talking about.
Yeah, it was like, at first I'm like, I need to point out that I don't enjoy the show, but it's not for the reasons that people were saying they weren't going to enjoy the show.
Right.
You know, it's not that relevant. You know, I mean, it's a witch's coven. You know, you're going to get that level of, you know, there's going to be something about those characters that are going to upset people. And yes, I believe there were people online that even thought that, you know, at least the green character should be white underneath. You know, but gut reaction, Eric, who's worse, Star Wars or Marvel fans? I think I know your answer.
Doctor Who fans.
Oh, Cardiff would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Of
Who,
all of
who
them,
knew? It started with wrestling fans for decades.
Right.
Then Star Wars fans became the big problem.
Yep.
And I'm a wrestling fan too, so I understand.
Hell yeah, you are.
Yeah, so you know, the Star Wars fans then became almost up there with the wrestling fans, and then in the last few years, it's like, wait, the rest of the world doesn't really know Doctor Who. There's pockets that do, but now this is up at a third tier on the internet of hate and violence, and you go, where did this show come from with this audience just hating everything? Like, the other two I get, but this one now all of a sudden is giving the other two fan bases a run for their money.
Yeah, well, no, that is actually not the answer I expected, but it is also.
Which did you were going to say, Marvel?
I thought your thought was Marvel. Because
well, Marvel's fractured too, because you get the Marvel hate from the Sony Spider-Man stuff, which I think we all agree is terrible, and then you get,
except for Madam Web, which was exemplary.
Jordan, hit him with a chair. So the Madam Web stuff is terrible, but then you get the other side where the people complaining about the MCU, and I look, there were some legitimate complaints about where the MCU started after Infinity War and Endgame, But I think they've made some corrections, and I don't think people are willing to give that a shot. Is like say, they're trying to repair and redirect their course. Hopefully, Deadpool Wolverine, which opens this weekend, is going to be the thing that gets us in that direction. But just calm down. You guys are not as bad as everything else that's happening over here with Star Wars.
I do like the pop-up video nature in the chat of the things that Ivan Soto is telling us. Vanestra's actress was great in the way too short-lived show Single Drunk Female.
She was.
I can't say that I've ever heard of that, but I definitely appreciate that. And
the internet hate was also on her for a long time too, because she is the wife of the showrunner.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
right.
like everyone's like, it's this is a cast of, friends and family. Like, this is the James Gunn of Star Wars, where all his friends are making this show, and you're getting the job because you're married to the director.
So,
maybe
and hate on Tim
YouTube.
Burton. Like, come on, like.
So
they already do for that one.
So she's the Leslie Mann of this project, is what you're
pretty
trying
much.
to tell
Yes.
us. Yeah. I actually didn't know that, and I don't think she has enough screen time for her to have annoyed me, or maybe it's just because of some of the other characters. So, Mark, in terms of being overall largely disappointed in the show, what do you think they did best from your point of view?
Choreography was fun. I actually really liked Carrie-Anne Moss, and I liked her character a lot. I liked the reveal that she was kind of like the most on the level character, who had to like cover shit up, but she was doing it for OSHA. But like, she was the one that was like, leave him alone. Like, no, don't go after him. We're here investigating. You don't have to put your nose into everything. I liked the Stranger a lot. It's hard to find a lot to like about it for me, though. It all fell flat. I never connected with any of it. I just didn't care. But I did like Carrie-Anne Moss's performance, choreography. I did. To earlier point was made. I forget who said it. The idea that we see the Jedi fight without lightsabers and actually using Force. I thought that was a really fun aspect. Some of the new concepts that were introduced, like Vergence in the Force, which we heard in Phantom Menace, but I always thought they were referring to like a virginal birth instead of like, this is a Force concentration. I thought it was a
convergence. Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting concept that I wish they had delved a little more into, despite the overwhelming hatred everyone has for the third episode. I was interested in seeing a different faction of Force users and how they view the Force, when they call it the thread. I would have liked to have known kind of like where they come from, their genesis. I would have liked to have seen how they created OSHA and May. Their powers, were they dark side? Like, because she was turning into mist. She was about to go to the island on Lost. I was like, well, that's new, and just no context for it. So I thought those were really interesting ideas that just didn't follow through with.
Well, and that's what I think is the problem with the show overall, is that you have to depend on prior knowledge to enjoy some of the things, because that's a different faction of the Witches of Dathomir. They were exiled because the Jedi don't like other people having their powers. It's why they hate the Sith. It's why they don't like the Witches of Dathomir. That's why they exile these women to Brendok. You have to know all that to understand it, and unfortunately, they don't do a good job of explaining any of that.
Yeah.
But I actually don't agree with you, because they don't mention any of the names, and I think they're pretty good at like, of course there's Force users that don't utilize the Force in the same way, and it would allow like a different kind of viewpoint of what the Force is or what the Force could be. Like, they never mentioned Dathomir, they never mentioned all this stuff, and so to see a different part of the Force being utilized in a different way, and almost like the Vergence was never come into. I kind of liked that. I felt like, at least with that aspect, they were really good at not like explaining too much and just allowing it to be like, there are other people besides Jedi that can use the Force. Not all of them are Jedi. They utilize the Force in this way. Cool. They do the hand thing. Great. That's all I kind of need to know. And so I'm not sure. and maybe it's because I know the lore, so I could kind of tune it out a little bit. But I think they did a pretty good job to make it as user friendly as possible, because they weren't of Dathomir.
Showing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry, Eric. I apologize for interrupting. I wanted to bring this point up because Jordan. I know I'm such an asshole. Jordan makes such a great point. I've watched every live action Star Wars. I can quote the original trilogy beat to beat perfectly.
Can you sing B. Arthur's song from the Christmas special?
No, I cannot. I have not seen the Christmas special.
I thought you were a fan, Mark.
Oh.
I'm getting to that. I've only seen snippets of some of the animated series, and one of the biggest problems that I've had is that so much of the lore is in these animated series that I'm not familiar with. So like bleeding a kyber crystal, I knew there were kyber crystals, but that had no meaning to me, and everybody else was like, oh, same with like Plagueis. I know Plagueis has been mentioned,
right?
But if you haven't read those books, you don't know who the hell that is. Who's creeping out of the corner? I don't know. Yeah, some guy hanging out on this ocean planet behind the stone.
That is one of the things I wanted to mention, is that that is sort of a kind of an inside character, but I guess the nod there is like, oh, this is where he gets the idea for Anakin. I mean, is that supposed to be our takeaway? Jordan, you seem to know that stuff.
It's more of introducing the character of Darth Plagueis the Wise, the one that they talk about in episode 3. But
what a tragedy.
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Sounds like a King Arthur character.
Yeah, pretty much. And the idea is that he is supposed to be very knowledgeable, and he's supposed to have this ability to be able to create life, which is what Anakin wanted to save Padme. So to kind of shoehorn him in, just like, oh, I peeked in on you guys talking about this, this is where I get the knowledge, also is kind of bad storytelling, because in the books and all the other lore, he knows that kind of stuff. He's wise to that kind of stuff. He doesn't just overhear it with two people just blankly talking about what happened. So that was kind of weird. It's nice that they introduce him. I hope if we get more stuff, they flesh that out a little bit more. I feel like that was like the Hail Mary. Same with the right at the end where you see the back of Yoda. Like, it's just, oh, remember these characters? Great.
Remember?
Hopefully,
remember Yoda?
But they ran out of the budget at the end, so it's just an original toy that they put off in the distance with the camera behind it. Saved them on CGI.
Force perspective, yeah.
Eric, what was the point?
Force perspective. I see what you did there.
Talking about that could be the name of this episode.
Force
I was talking about different factions, communities, civilizations, entities, all using the Force in different ways. We know it as the Force in of certain ways because of the Jedi and because of the Sith, but the Witches episode could have had the potential to showing that even though they don't call it the Force, but they're using it in a different way, even though it's the same thing. It's like religions here in our world, where there's some stuff that's in Catholicism, Christianity, in Judaism, in Muslim cultures, Hindu cultures. There's certain things that kind of share or are the same. All the other aspects are different, but there's certain basic roots of all that stuff that we all kind of share in this. And that could have been the thing. It's like, well, they don't know of the Jedi, or they're not really involved with the Jedi. So what they knew and what their civilization grew up with around there, they're using it, but in a different way. They call it something different and all that. That's interesting. That's great. Using it to just make space babies is terrible. And then infecting people's, well, I don't even think the Force stuff was when they got into the one guy's mind. That was just their witchcraft stuff, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Force.
It was which is it's not a Jedi mind trick, to borrow a phrase from elsewhere, but I think you're right. There are some of those commonalities here in the real world, like the different religions. I believe every holy tome in every religion says that you can't wear white after Labor Day. I'm not sure, but I do believe that is the case. So this would be an example that we see in the Star Wars.
Well, then look at the
universe.
Sith. They're good all year long, wearing black.
That's true. Huck Walton, pop-up video, which I appreciate, not being the only one who knows what that is. Kate, do you know what pop-up
sound effect too? The bubble.
Kate, do you know what pop-up video is?
I feel like I'm about to.
No, it was on VH1. It was a show.
VH1, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
They
it
would
was a
show music videos and then pop up little factoids throughout the
Yeah,
video telling
like-
you where the video was
Cute.
shot or why this lyric was
Right.
changed or look at the
Re-
boots this guy's wearing.
Recognize this actor in the background, that sort of thing.
Right.
And
That's
by the way,
kinda
Huck Walton earlier disagreed with Eric, and he says Star Wars has the most polarized fan base. But I hope that you guys can get into a polarized Twitter conversation about.
That's
which
all right.
one.
I'm banning him right now. Give me a second.
So yeah, I think that there are hints of interesting things, but I think it's just because I like other Star Wars, and I do think that maybe after this series, maybe people need to apologize to the Obi-Wan series, or certainly to Ahsoka.
No,
I think that there were you liked this.
I
but,
liked Ahsoka, and I didn't know
I like
anything
Ahsoka.
about the character and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I never watched any of the animated shows, and between Jordan and another friend of ours who watched them as they were coming out and all of that stuff, and were filling me in on the character. Going into it, not really knowing the history of the character and the story of that stuff, I actually enjoyed it. Like, I liked Andor and I liked Ahsoka. The other ones, Mandalorian started off great and then kind of went The Boba Fett thing was terrible. I liked that one, and in this one too. You were talking about things that you actually liked about the series. It had nothing to do with the story. It had nothing to do with the characters. But I liked I guess it's the cinematography of it all. The scenery, the planets, everything. When they started off with the kids playing in the woods, kind of looked like Endor, the big, giant, oversized trees and all that stuff. Every time they went to a different planet, looked fascinating. In Ahsoka, when they were hiding in that forest where it was all the pink and red leaves under the trees, stuff like that, it was like a negative world where all the colors were reversed. Star Wars does a great job with landscapes, oceans, views, things like that. Even towards the end, when he's on that little remote island on whatever water planet they were on there, looked fantastic, looked amazing. So that always kind of keeps you in, no matter how bad the story is. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to stare off into the horizon there and just check out the planet for a little bit before they ruin it again.
And to pull on that thread, for me, I think Book of Boba Fett was the thing I was most disappointed in. However, the set design, the props, the costumes, it's all so well done that
the 1950s greaser bikers.
Well, no, not that part.
With all the different color bikes, like it was
the
like
Wild
like it were
Bunch
Biff Tannen's friends from Back to the Future.
Yes, exactly.
Billy Zane? What is he doing over here?
So yeah, but I do agree. There is always that sort of level of quality once you get. I want to kind of ask you, Kate, sort of the reverse, and Jordan, we'll get to you in a second. But because you mostly liked the show, was there a thing that was just, this was too much? You're talking about episode 3. Was there a character? Was there a storyline that went throughout the season that was too much for you? And was there something that had you heard us having this conversation, you might have been like, well, they're starting to sound right because this thing really annoyed me, but then they would have won you back the following week.
I mean, I feel like as fans of this franchise, I feel like everyone has made really good points. The story didn't, and for a story not to hit and not be as consistent, and for it to feel bland, despite my kind of weird peaks of like, I can kind of see where they're going. So I can appreciate at least what they were attempting. But if it didn't stick the landing, then it didn't stick the landing. And that is also an issue. But I think they did try to course correct, especially with episode 3 and parts of episode 7, because they went a lot to the same location. So they could kind of, it was just where episode 3 was where I noticed that they only did a flashback episode. And episode 7 was where they only did this was my one person's perspective of this flashback episode. And I felt like the show could be more clever than that. And that really bothered me because it kind of, this is a weird thing to say. Does anyone remember that part in Half-Blood Prince, the Harry Potter movie, where Slughorn in his little memory starts yelling because he's lying in the memory? It kind of feels like it would have been interesting. And maybe this is just like the what if would have been interesting, is if that 3rd episode was kind of treated like Osha doesn't really remember what happened. And so the lines can be more pedestrian because this is her memory of what happened. And to make that absolutely clear that this is the intention, you can have the cinematography be slightly more pedestrian, or the writing be slightly more pedestrian in contrast to the rest of the show. And you can actually shift what the visual language is to match a childlike perspective of that memory, so that when you get the memory again and it's Soul's version, you can also switch that visual language to match his perspective. So you could literally get perspective shifts. And maybe you could do that with between May and Osha too. Like they notice different things, or, you know, Osha talks to the pip droid and then May starts to talk to the pip droid later. But like, what do people notice in this perspective? What are people's points of view? And how do people hear and remember certain things? I felt like some parts of the writing, like the writing got really good for me in episode 6, and that's way too late. And so I feel like they were trying to get to the end of the show, forgetting that they had 4 more episodes before that. Like the show started to get good. Like I was talking to my boyfriend, like, I'm liking the show, but it's episode 6, and I feel like that's a little too late for me. But now that I've gotten to the end, I can see what they were trying to set up, but maybe they didn't do it the best. And being part of this conversation, maybe they didn't set it up the best that they could. And unfortunately that like Yord and Yestra, like it did affect some characters that could have been more grounded in what they were doing, as opposed to being in a less grounded state. But I don't know, maybe Mark as a writer and Jordan and Eric, maybe you can like chime in of, you know, maybe those changes might have been more interesting and would that have made the show more interesting for you to watch?
I think they could have drawn the mystery out further. Like, give it a couple more episodes, draw the mystery out. Because once you hit the end of episode 2, guess what? Here's the killer. She's this twin of the other one. Okay, great. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, then you get the reveal of who the stranger is. I think episode 5, after the big
episode 5 is when you get the reveal of the stranger.
Yeah.
Right. But at that point, you already it's been telegraphed. So it's not a surprise. You got left on a cliffhanger and you're like, great, I have to wait a week to see him take off his helmet or get to know who he is. It's just, if the mystery was drawn out a little further and maybe even not fully revealed at the end, maybe we don't know who the stranger is by episode 8, 9, 10, whatever they end up doing. Leave that for the mystery for the further on. That could have been a much better way of telling the story. But the flashbacks, again, episode 7 being a flashback from a different point of view on an 8-episode run is a bad placement of that. It wasn't necessary. You could have maybe made that episode, like, leave the cliffhanger after the stranger comes down from the tree looking like Spider-Man. He comes in, does his thing, and then you don't give us the reveal the next week. That's the flashback. And then maybe you do it. So you kind of jump it. Like you do the X-Files thing where you have the monster of the week, but then you have the overarching storyline.
Yeah.
Give us that in that way.
And I haven't seen Russian Doll, which is Leslie Headland's kind of claim to. So maybe there were some storytelling elements that she started that worked really well in Russian Doll that didn't transfer as well. But I haven't seen the show, so I'm not sure if it's just a reading sort of.
Something happened with Russian Doll too. The first season of Russian Doll was, got rave reviews for Netflix, and then the second season came out and people were excited, and then I don't think I ever either started or finished. I'm trying to remember the second season. But then it just fell off and nobody was talking about it anymore. Like it just disappeared after the first season was like, oh my God, this show's amazing, and then nothing. This season, the way that it seems like they tried to rush and change the ending of all of this. I think something happened during the shooting of all this, and maybe some of the episodes were being test screened, and they went, these are already done. We can't fix those here. We got to try to fix what we can in the last couple episodes. Again, I'll bring it back to wrestling. It seems like they had an outline for the way this match was supposed to go. It was a big match.
And then someone got injured.
Someone got injured. Something happened, and they had to make it up on the fly. Vince is in the headphones like, all right, change it in there. Tell the ref, tell this guy that we got to do this and all that. It just seemed like those last couple episodes was patchwork, and they were racing to get to an ending. So they're like, at least we're done, and then we can figure it out for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
for the next season if it happens.
Yeah, because and thank you, Ivan, for turning me on to like Single Drunk Female. I didn't know that Headland show ran that, and now I'm gonna watch it more closely because I just realized there's 2 seasons. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna look at
so
that.
Ivan Soto in the chat points out that Leslie Headland was a showrunner of Sickle Drunk Female, and that's not even a sci-fi show, so there's that tie. And Huck Walton had mentioned Leslie Headland is a fantastic writer. Her episode 6 scripting was really well crafted. I think the fundamental problem that I had was what my expectations became. So back in it was around May the 4th, they put Phantom Menace back in theater. So I took my son to see it, and I told him we had to stay to the end of the credits because I wanted to see this teaser trailer for The Acolyte. And that's basically the beginning scene with Carrie-Anne Moss. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be Star Wars Matrix Revolutions. This looks like it's going to be awesome. And then when you actually watch it, you're like, oh man, she was only alive for like 20 more seconds after that teaser trailer.
And she was pretty prominent in a lot of the advertising. That's why it was really
reversed. I wish Carrie-Anne Moss was Soul and Soul was Carrie-Anne Moss.
Right.
They just switched places.
That might have been better. Yeah.
That probably would have been better. That's a great point. But
I think we were talking about Leslie Headland, and she's a really good writer. I think this show suffered from way too many cooks in the kitchen because she originally pitched this as an Asajj Ventress story.
Oh,
that's what she wanted to do.
Cool.
And I have a feeling that the brain trust at Lucasfilm came in, well, we're not really interested in doing that because we'll probably do like an animated short or something like that. And so
Ventress
I think
showed up in the latest season of Bad Batch. So that might have been too much crossover.
So I think they meddled a little bit. I think because she's a very good writer, I have a feeling she probably went in with a strong point of view and they muddied the waters big time.
Always with the meddling.
Always with the meta.
Asteroides. The show should have been a mini series. The format screwed it up. That's a Disney Plus subscription model screwing it over. It is only an 8-episode series, though. I think the idea that it was a limited event series could have worked a bit more. About Venestra could have padded it out to 2 3-hour episodes. They're going to bring Ventress into the live action. That's why she wasn't allowed to use the character. And somewhere in here, our buddy Ivan Soto heard something about Filoni being involved and didn't like how the show is being handled. So that thought of maybe test screenings or something, it could be Filoni finally was able to turn his attention and goes like, no, you guys are messing this up. And Huck Walton seems to agree that she got steamrolled.
Well, do you think at some point the money handlers basically said you have to stop spending money? They spent $180 million on the series. That's like $22 million per episode, and some of the episodes don't look like they got the full cast of money on that one.
Well, that's a great point, and I wish I was able to.
I wonder how much of it was additional photography.
Well, that's a great point. Everything always has that built into the budget, but some of the episodes were so short. I want to know how much that $180 million goes to per minute.
I wonder if it was originally 6 episodes and then they added the third one because it's the same director as 7, but same set locations, but different writers than the other episodes. And I feel like they were with the way that the shots were structured, it was very, very limited visual language that they could use because they had basically like one hallway and a half, maybe. And then like a couple other scenes that were definitely more built out to be in episode 7, because then you get the A story, B story plot line of the 2 girls and Soul witnessing. But I wonder if it was supposed to be 6 episodes and the rest of the story was kind of beated out differently. And then because they took too long explaining what the story was, we need a flashback episode in episode 3, which is the kind of the only time they don't do the like day, night, teach, corrupt. Like it's just called Destiny. And it's like I'm like, okay, this doesn't fit within like even like the title structure of what you're doing. So I wonder if they felt like they had to lengthen to 8 because you can't just have 7. So they restructured the rest of the show. So I maybe that is what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has an opinion about it.
No, I mean the episode numbers. I think in general, as much as I loved the initial Netflix Marvel shows, the first few seasons of pretty much all of them were about 3 episodes too long because there was a point towards the end of each of them where they like went off and did some other stuff and then came back around. It's like, oh, they all would have been amazing 10 episode shows. Some of them still worked very well as 13 episodes. So I don't have a problem with 6 to 8 episodes if that's what your story is. But to Kate's point, I could see, someone somewhere is like, well, these are really 7 episodes, but that doesn't sound right. So let's go ahead and have an episode of filler. What does any of the rest of you think about that possibility?
I think it actually, I think they probably meant it to be 8 episodes, actually. I think structurally, each episode kind of hits a beat of feature film writing.
Okay.
So episode 7, Dan Harmon famously in his story circle calls that the paying the heavy price moment. I think the paying the heavy price is finding out Saul is the one that's.
I think
return. Yeah, and then you return to your place of comfort having changed.
Is the last one.
But this is a tragedy. So the change there actually isn't, or the change is for the worse because Osha goes to the dark side. So she doesn't. Her ultimate dramatic arc is not one of positive change. It's one of negative change. It's a tragedy. Change. Yeah. So I do think, but I think one of the reasons it feels murky is because the episodes are so short and you're dealing with some, what you think are heavy themes. And it's a critique I've had of most of the Star Wars shows, except for Obi-Wan and Andor, that they're just so short. I don't think they are allowing themselves to get into the meat and the nitty gritty of these stories. But I think structurally they probably meant it to be 8. I think it was just because 3 and 7 to me just seems so meticulous to their grand design. I just don't think they stuck the landing very well.
Actually, Mark, I think you're right. Because each episode lines up with a story circle component perfectly.
Yeah.
This is nuts. This is really cool, actually.
Actually, most shows you watch, they're going to line up with, if they're serialized television, 8
but
to 10
episode
episodes.
1, episode 2, matches each section of the story. That's really cool.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Kate, I know you had to run momentarily, so I want to make sure we give you a chance to talk about Writers of the Lost Ark, where people can find you, and anything else you've got going on.
Oh, yeah. I have a podcast called The Writers of the Lost Ark. And it's where I talk about.
And for our audio audience, Lost ARC. I think it's important to make sure they understand.
It's a playoff of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's Raiders of the Lost.
It is. I had no idea.
I was going to explain it to him later.
My jokes are funnier, Eric. When I that's
it's a
how
visual
it goes.
gag.
Just like everybody's jokes. Their jokes are always better when you explain it.
And you need to know when I tell a joke, Christian, because you have to ring the bell when I do one. Thank you. And it's a podcast about me becoming a screenwriter and trying to look at intellectual properties and what we can learn about them in terms of story structure, character arcs, A plot versus B plot, how to write a MacGuffin, what makes a good object in a story. And we've gone through Indiana Jones. I did an episode on Dune, and we're about to go through animation as a medium, and we're about to hit Lord of the Rings and world building soon. So excited about that.
And where can people find that, Kate?
You can find that on YouTube, or if you like the Geekscape Network, you can find it on the Geekscape Network of podcasts on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, Kate, thank you for being with us. I am glad that
her logo is like that. I had no idea. Look at that.
That's pretty cool.
For the
This
visual,
all makes sense now.
Wait a minute.
Told you, it's a visual
Hold it
gag.
up again for our
Look at
visual
that.
By the
Now
way,
I get it.
I took my son to see Raiders at the New Beverly about 2 weeks ago. That's the sort of the revival always on film movie house that Quentin Tarantino bought to save from sort of ruin. Yeah.
Nice.
So I took him to see that there, and it was good. It was the first time he'd ever seen
cool.
it. Yeah, the seats are very uncomfortable.
God.
But he also, there was also like a great Woody Woodpecker short beforehand. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's no way he's seen anything like this.
That's
but anyway, so Kate, great to chat with you. And we will
talk to everybody.
We will talk again soon. And so people can find that on YouTube. Just type in Riders of the Lost Ark or it's on Geekscape, you said. So
yes. And podcast. the auditory version is on Geekscape. Yes.
Great. And
but a new channel will be coming soon.
Very soon, exactly. Well, thank you, Kate, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Always fun to have somebody who actually likes something that the curmudgeons among us are all like, Star Wars was better in the 80s.
And Kate, despite Christian's notes here on the side telling me not to subscribe, I subscribed. So we're good.
Hey!
I told you just to subscribe to my stuff, but all right. Well, thank you, Kate.
Well, then Christian, I'll have you on, and then it'll be your stuff too.
All right, that works. So, perfect way out. All right, thanks. So there was this comment in the chat that I wanted to get to. Mandalorian season 3 was a major step down, particularly when it turned into Star Wars: The Love Boat, the episode with Jack Black and Lizzo. That was what I threw my hands up, and I'm like, no, that's
a great way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing about that episode. That episode had the issues with the Jack Black stuff, but when the Mandalorian separated himself from those characters and was actually doing like detective work, that was cool. But they had to shoehorn in, cameo time. So that was a rough episode.
Wow. Sorry, Kate misses. She missed the comment on someone who appreciated her being on. That's all right. I'll send it to her. So the final point I want to make, and it's probably good Kate had to leave when she did, because it really just comes down to the
women writers and women directors.
No.
You're always going off about that.
Space witches.
I would feel
the whole network's run by a woman. That's where the problems start. It's like, Christian, come on, be a bit more open-minded.
Eric, that's our off-air conversation. Don't bring.
Sorry.
Yeah, you got to put that in the private portion.
So, but the reason is that she sees it as something that she was able to enjoy. But I bring my curmudgeonly spin to it, because every year I always post on May the 4th a list that I do post partially to troll people and annoy people. It is my ranking of the Star Wars films. And,
I hate this list already.
You're supposed to, but it is honestly how I feel for the most part.
I think you're trolling.
Well, a little bit trolling. Return of the Jedi was my favorite when I was 7, and I stand by that.
I have to point out, just because it says Last Jedi does not mean it has to be last on the list. You could put it anywhere you want.
Unfortunately, it does mean that for me.
Damn it!
And I know that it's a very divisive film, and I usually shrug off anybody who really liked it. It's when they rank it ahead of any of the original 3, when they put it anywhere like 2 or 3. And by the way, Matt Kelly, who we know from Geekscape, Mark, I think it's his second favorite. And I'm like, Matt, I love you. But
I wouldn't go that high, but I do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the problem with the Acolyte is what it does to this ranking, because my list, just for our audio audience, goes Return of the Jedi, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, Force Awakens, Solo, Phantom Menace, Rise of Skywalker, Attack of the Clones. Here's the smart ass part: Caravan of Courage, Ewok Adventure, Holiday Special, then Last Jedi. Well, I got to put the fucking Acolyte above Last Jedi now, and it just ruins my joke, I got to put Last Jedi above the Acolyte. The Acolyte needs to be. I've never enjoyed Star Wars less. And I've never been more
And
mad.
he put Solo at number 7, so that's pretty rough.
That's definitely trolling.
Oh, I hope so.
That's for the That's
if you really want to troll the audience, change the O's to U's.
I love that Sulu movie.
oh my. So my thing would be that nobody has to go through and by the way, every year somebody takes the bait on that list, but I mostly feel that way because of how I feel about Last Jedi. But where is this for each of you? Is it this is the worst Star Wars, or and you don't have Mark, I can't believe you haven't seen the whole Christmas special. I know what we're we're renting out a bar for Christmas time, and we'll have a Geekscape event, because I think everybody needs to see the whole thing.
Good.
I'm there.
But where does this rank for you, Mark? Is this the worst? It's just that simple. You don't have to actually go through a number order. Is this the worst, or you're like, no, it's just it's a misfire?
It's a misfire. It's low. I think Ahsoka's the worst. I thought Ahsoka was just the most boring, uninteresting thing I'd ever seen. So I'd rank it above Ahsoka and maybe Boba Fett, and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I can see that. What about you, Eric?
Well, I haven't there's still some things I haven't seen. Like I said, I haven't seen like Clone Wars or whatever the other animated series is.
Rebels.
Yeah, all that. I haven't seen any of those. I know they're beloved, so I'll just take everyone's word for that. Yeah, I this had hope. The twin storyline was fine. Until they had to make it more than just the mystery of where the twins came from, and the fact that they kept saying their names over and over, it turned into like Interstellar with Murph every time. So it was always like May, Asha, May, Asha. It's like, all right, we get it. You know their names. Everyone knows their names. You don't have to say it in every.
He had limited English, Eric. That was the only words he knew.
I know.
Those words are the same in Korean.
And you're. I will not sit here and take your disrespect for the Christmas. The holiday episode, because looking back at it now, yes, it was terrible for the time, but now you look back at it with a fondness, like it's like Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. So you go in there and you go, oh yeah, that was just something they did in the 70s and 80s. It's kind of hokey and cheesy, but you know, people watch Hallmark movies that are still doing the same schlock, so you look back at it now with a fondness. I was like, yeah, the story's terrible, but it's cute to sit there and watch and reminisce about it. So I don't even think that's the worst property in there. This could be the worst property. Boba Fett could have been the worst property. With as long as people have been craving for that character to come back in some way, shape, or form, and that is the dog pile that they threw him into so bad that they had to bring Mandalorian in. It's like, hey, can you take over the rest of this season just so people will still watch this? Because people like the Mandalorian, so let's just bring him in here and put Boba Fett hanging out at the bar, playing bartender, playing the Space Sam alone for a little bit while Mandalorian continues the story, and then it seems to be like a Band-Aid to fix that last
right.
season.
Ever since the Mandalorian started, everybody was like, "Oh man, it'll be so cool if we got Boba Fett." And then we get Boba Fett, and it's like, so can we bring back the Mandalorian? I don't know.
Boba Fett should have been a series of appearances in the Mandalorian storyline. It should not have been, hey, Boba Fett's here, and oh crap, this isn't working. Bring the Mandalorian back and fix that. So
this is from a few minutes ago. Dade Murphy 0. It belongs there. I believe he's agreeing with me on Last Jedi. Jordan, I don't think we've gotten sort of where this slots in for you, and I wanted to give you a chance to.
I'm a hard person to gauge on this because my opinion is that I love Star Wars so much that even bad Star Wars is fun Star Wars for me. Like there's always something to like about something, even if it's bad. I would say this ranks above Boba Fett. Definitely. Okay. Boba Fett, it for me was probably the miss of everything because it just felt weird. Like this, the way they did every episode, everything seemed slow and drawn out. And then you bring in the Mandalorian in later season, and then you're like, okay, well, this is his show now because we don't care anymore.
And they kind of ruined it like Halo, where they took the helmet off most of the time. He's just walking around without. It's like, leave the helmet on the entire time. We don't need to see the guy.
Oh, look, it's Mayor Boba Fett. No one cares about that series. I want to see him go on adventures, not try to figure out,
Yeah, you didn't
take him over a town.
You didn't want him to be Dr. Fett Medicine Woman. That's not what you had signed.
Well, now I do. But yeah, I mean, in this series, there's a lot to like about this series. That nerdy stuff that I know plays into it. The fighting style of the Stranger is like an outlawed fighting style that the Jedi, who are very proper and prim, don't know how to counter. That's why he's stabbing Jecki 5 times in the chest. Seeing that stuff on screen is cool. Like I like that stuff. Fair. So for me, this was neat. Story-wise, it sucked. So
right.
Boba Fett, I just think kind of sucked until you get the Mandalorian, the Rancor, all the stuff, and later, this was cool in parts for 8 episodes. Boba Fett, I just was bored until they brought the Darksaber episode in, and then he became part of it. And we reunited the 2 characters we loved, because God forbid we keep them apart too long. Otherwise, no one's going to like the 3rd season of the show. I think Boba Fett just falls short of everything. For me.
There were definitely story arcs from the 80s Marvel monthly Star Wars series that I enjoyed more than Book of Boba Fett and The Acolyte. So
I liked Ahsoka. I just hated watching it with Eric because every time he'd go, "Ooh, Darby Wales," and he just kept quoting Star Trek. It was weird.
It was like you gave him the recipe for for translucent aluminum? It's like, how do you know she didn't invent it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
A keyboard, how quaint. Ivan Soto wants to know, will we be seeing the Lego Star Wars show on Disney Plus that messes up the timeline with Darth Jar Jar? That's why I'm glad you're here, Ivan. I had no idea about that. I'm intrigued. It's not going to jump up to the top of my queue, but I am intrigued by that. I would definitely.
Some of those Lego shows were actually really funny. Like I like some of those. One where like they're talking, two characters are talking, and Watto's in the back going red flags, talking about Anakin, and like that's hilarious. Like that's good.
Ivan Soto, Ming-Na Wen deserved better than Boba Fett, and yes, she did. But she does have the hat trick of being a Disney princess, a Star Wars character, and a Marvel character, as long as you count Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So you can't take that away from her unless you do take Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. out of canon, which some people have. But I know that by mentioning that, Ivan's going to go into a tizzy because I know what a fan he was of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and so was I for the most part. Anyway, I'm glad that
Ghost Rider, right?
No, with Ghost Rider was fine. It was
when they went back in time or the future.
Yeah, it was when they go into whatever
Okay.
that simulation was. I was like, oh yeah, 6 episodes too long of that. That yeah, we're talking about the problems with 8-episode seasons. 22 episode seasons are the death of art.
Which you would think it wouldn't be, because regular standard American television storytelling up until like a decade or so ago was 22, 24. I mean, it was 24, then they dropped it to 22 because they had to fill TV time through the year, plus try to meet syndication goals, because every show's ultimate goal for a network was to get it to syndication so that they could sell it and make more money off of it. Now you don't have to format it to 22 minutes, whatever it is, to fit the half hour block with the ads. So you having the ability to fluctuate the time and like, well, yeah, this episode's 25 minutes, but this one's 34 minutes, because you're able to tell the story the way you need to do it and not cut it for time for network standards, whatever. And they're still messing it up. Like how you have all the freedom and the relaxed structure to tell the writers to tell the story they want to tell it, and they're still not getting it.
Well, I agree with all of that, but when you think about when people start compiling lists of their favorite dramas of recent years in particular, Sopranos and Breaking Bad would be shows that would be in the conversation for that. Succession is a more recent one that could be. Those are all 13 or less episode seasons. You know, in terms of network shows that get talked about like that, in terms of hour longs, the only one I really ever hear about is The West Wing, and I think it's hard to look at that as a whole series and say it was a great series. I think it was good at a certain point. So I'm okay if they feel they're telling the best story they can in 8 episodes. I would love to watch a 22 episode season and be like, it was great. And I'm not talking about half hours, so yeah, I think that the 8 to 10 episode range, unfortunately, some creators feel that that works for them, but that also makes them feel like they can write all of them, like Noah Hawley with Fargo and Legion, you know. And so I don't know what the right answer is. I just know that The Acolyte was not it for me. And Dade Murphy Zero, again, Gabriel Luna was great as Ghost Rider. There was a planned Ghost Rider spinoff from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we never did get to see that. And we all were hoping for Nick Cage cameo in that series, but we never got it. Can you, Ivan Soto, can you name any show that had 6 or 8 episodes and they were good? I mean, season 1 of Mandalorian, I think for the most part, I enjoyed. I like the first season. I like season 2 mostly because of the ending. You know, that was so exciting the way the season ended. I was like, I don't even remember what happened in the rest of it. But you're making a point.
I can. I like an 8-episode thing. Harley Quinn, the animated series.
Okay, that's
is fantastic writing, fantastic execution of what their storytelling, and just being absurd and silly. And then also shows like Letterkenny, which go and their spin-off Shoresy, which goes 8 episodes, you know, for a half season or a full season, depending what they're doing. Certain shows do nail the shorter format, and like, oh my, we can have fun with this, we can play with it. The episode lengths are different, and they get to the end where they need to be, and it's perfectly fine. So there are ways to do it.
There's plenty of shows.
I guess it's like one of you were saying earlier, maybe it's meddling from from networks coming in with their notes like the old fashioned TV days.
Yeah.
Who knows? But there are shows out there
Yeah,
that can do this.
I'll stand by Peacemaker as an 8-episode series that I thought
Mhm.
worked really well. So Asteroides makes a point to Taboo by BBC is a perfect show with that many episodes. When you turn to the BBC, you're dealing with the very low episode numbers. Faulty Towers, arguably one of the greatest comedies ever made, had 2 6-episode seasons. Ricky Gervais' original Office, those were 6-episode seasons with a couple of specials later.
The British Ghosts.
Yeah,
Oh,
which they played during the writer's strike. They're like, well, let's fill some time. Let's put that out there.
They did 7 episodes.
No.
Well, they did 6 episodes the first season and then 7 episodes the rest because they were Christmas specials. Those were fantastic. So many things on Apple TV Plus too. 8 episodes.
Yeah, I don't remember how long Severance was, but I feel like that
8.
was a
I'm
short
pretty sure it
season,
was
but that
8.
was 8. Yeah, so that's a perfect example. But to Ivan's point, you can often feel like you haven't gotten enough story, but Asteroides says each season of Peaky Blinders is 6 episodes. Same creator-writer of both series has written the Dawn of the Jedi script for James Mangold.
And Ted Lasso, that was like an 8-episode or 10-episode season, and those nailed it home too. And they were like hour-long episodes.
Yeah, they even have like an extra episode where, Beard wanders around town at night, which it's like I didn't, it's like you.
I think they had to actually add that in because they had agreed to a certain length that they didn't meet. So they kind of quickly threw together the Beards getting new pants episode. It was so weird.
They actually got their episode order increased after they'd already broken the season. So they added the Christmas episode and the Beard episode, and they did it like after the season. But to make it fit in.
Well, look at this. We got Ivan Soto to agree with us. That's true.
There you go.
There you go,
so
Ivan.
I feel like that would be the time to
punch out
tidy
on a high
things
note.
up. Yes, exactly. So,
Stick landing.
Mark, what would you like to promote? Where do you want people to find you other than once I finally finish the final season of Star Trek Discovery, which I'm not even close to finishing, but I do want to do an episode on it at some point. That's a bad reaction. Yeah.
I got 3 episodes in and literally forgot about it until you just mentioned it right now.
Well, there you go. Sounds like you enjoyed it.
Yeah, loved it. Amazing, just like all the other seasons. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Mark S. Hampton. I'm running screenplays right now. That's all I'm doing.
And you'll be, as I will be, making appearances at the Geekscape booth at San Diego Comic-Con. And I want to say the booth number, but I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm going to look it up while I ask Eric. No, I know. I got to look it up. While I ask Eric and Jordan to tell. So it's booth 1632 at San Diego Comic-Con is the Geekscape booth. You'll see Mark. You'll see me. You'll see some other friends there.
What are you doing at the booth there?
I don't know. I'm going to have a stack of resumes if people still take them. And, just going to hand them to anybody and everybody I know.
Bagging buttons and T-shirts and whatnot. Little
well, there's going to be signings at the table, so probably helping facilitate things like that. But
very nice.
If one person wants a photo with me, I will. The Vegas line is set under, so we'll see how that goes. But Eric and Jordan, what would you gents like to promote?
Well, unfortunately, neither one of us are going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, but we are going to be in San Diego like a couple weeks after that, doing our show down there. And down there for a radio convention. But the show that Jordan and I do is called It's Erik Nagel. You can find it on iHeartRadio, but it's available Apple, Spotify, all those places you get your on-demand content. And if you want to watch us live as we do the show, YouTube, Twitch, our channel's under It's Erik Nagel, all one word. You can watch it there, and you can watch the produced episodes, the final episodes, whatever you want to call them, all up on the YouTube channel there as well. And It's Erik Nagel across the board on all social media.
And unlike some shows, if you want to watch the live recording, it's not behind the paywall, is it, Eric? I believe you don't have the paywall like I do.
It's coming. We've been talking about it. The live shows, to watch it live, yes, it'll be free. But as soon as the show is done, it'll go behind the paywall.
All right,
everybody else does.
That's fine. Asteroides says, "Don't bother finishing Discovery. It was excruciating." That's not. And I'm sorry, I got to bring this one up. Deadpool. This is Ivan Soto. Deadpool and Wolverine will be my first R-rated movie. Wish me luck. I don't want to see it, but it's now MCU. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Jordan's first R-rated movie was Barton Fink.
Barton Fink.
Wow.
Me and my friends went driving down the street with it. Yeah.
I honestly, we recently did a RoboCop episode, which I know I saw in the theater when I was 11, and I don't know if that was my first R-rated movie, but it's certainly one of them. You know,
that is a movie that has burned in my brain because it was post-divorce with my parents, and my dad had taken me and my sister down to like Tijuana, Mexico, to kind of hang out and go do stuff. But we stayed in a hotel in San Diego, and he had fallen asleep, and I had the control of the TV, and it was the first time I saw RoboCop. I must have been 7 or 8. It was mind-blowing. It's still one of the best awesome movies that I've ever watched. So I love it.
So, Jordan, your plugs are tied up in Eric's, right? Do you have anything individually before we say goodnight?
I do. So when I'm not co-hosting with Erik, I have another podcast that I do called I'll Watch It Later. We kind of just watch movies that we probably should have been watching a long, long time ago. Things like, Casablanca, and, we just watched Maltese Falcon and things like that. So we kind of go through things that, you always say like, yeah, I'll watch it. And you never do. So you just kind of catching up on history. So we do all those kinds of things. We talk about our lives and what we see. And we go to movies all the week. We just talk about Twisters, and we're going to all talk about Deadpool because everyone's got our tickets. You can catch us Watch Later Pod on Instagram. I'll Watch It Later podcast on YouTube. And yeah, that's it.
I was doing a similar show once upon a time for a network called Popcorn Talk that was part of AfterBuzz, and it was embarrassing, some of the movies that I had to admit that I hadn't seen. Like Taxi Driver was one of them. So
we covered that one too. I was like, why have I not watched this movie yet? It's
I have a list. I'll admit one to you. I've never seen Terminator 2.
But have you seen Terminator 3?
I haven't seen any of the Terminators except a couple years ago. I watched Terminator 1 for the first time, but that was it was 2019 when I watched that one. So yeah, I have a list of movies that I've not watched either.
Well, it'll be our final point. And Mark, is there one that you have that you're like, yeah, I know I should have seen it, or do you feel like you've checked off all the boxes that
I need to watch way more Hitchcock than I have.
That's a great answer. Yeah,
I've got all I got the 4K sets. All of them. They're just
nice. Yeah, I would say North by Northwest, Rear Window, Vertigo. If none of those are in there, yeah, those are all great. Well, thank you, Jensen. Thanks to Kate for being with us. We appreciate all of that. In the weeks ahead, we will be having some Deadpool and Wolverine talk, but we'll also be having that over on the Geekscape Network. So make sure you subscribe in both places, and we'll be doing a special on the Jim Henson documentary that Disney Plus had with Mark's wife, Katie,
my lady.
Katie and Matt Kelly, also from Geekscape. So
she cried a lot, just to let you know.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I'm going to see if I'll ask for tricks to try and get her to cry during the show, because I think that'll be clippable. Nice. But anyway, thanks again to everybody and everybody in the live chat. Ivan Soto, Terminator, Sarah Connor Chronicles was good. I did enjoy that, but that is definitely all the time we have for now. Thank you again, and we will see you next time on the Bladtcast.